This is the Renault Logan, one of India's favorite taxi cabs. It became well known for its no-nonsense approach and simplicity in design, a design that was penned by a person called Benoit Jacob. And his latest creation is this. This is the i8, the new flagship sports car for BMW. In form, it looks like the spiritual successor to the M1, thanks to its sharp, low-slung nose with the deep dish coupe in the center. The silhouette is a smooth arc hinting towards the car's clean aerodynamics. The i8 has scissor doors because wing doors like the M1 would make it too much of an SLS AMG inspiration in today's times. The construction of this car lies on a layered design architecture that BMW calls Life Drive. It is essentially an egg and nest arrangement, where the passenger cell, like an egg, sits enclosed in the nest, which is the chassis. Flowing bodywork with the floating buttresses under the glass boot lid looks stunning. To me, it makes cars like the 911s and the Aston Martins look like stuff of the past. In fact, I like it so much that I can't help but wonder why BMW doesn't make enough sports cars.
To drive this car, we have come to Pokhran in Rajasthan for three reasons. One, this is the place where India carried out its nuclear tests and propelled itself into the future. And future, as you can see, is our theme for today. The second reason is, this car is another step in preventing the whole world from turning into a desert like this. And the third reason is, Rajasthan has simply the best roads that India has to offer, and with the least traffic. Like any other sports car, even the i8 manages to turn a lot of heads, and I particularly like the view that I get from this rearview mirror. Makes me feel like I'm driving a Batmobile. In fact, this car doesn't look like a spaceship on wheels, but it still manages to look very outlandish. So much so that if you buy one of these, you may have to redesign your entire house to match the car.
It isn't a spaceship on the inside either. The cabin is typical BMW with the center console tilted towards the driver and the cockpit virtually wrapping itself around the driver's seat. All the controls therefore fall easily at hand.
There are, however, a couple of problems. The door sills, they look a little unfinished, and because the doors open in this manner, there can't be any door pockets. Because there are no door pockets, you have to rely on these cubby holes in the center console. And there's one more problem. If I have to use my phone to play music, or maybe use an iPod to play music through the USB port, I can't close this. And if I were to charge my phone using a 12-volt socket, it's right here, and I can't close this either.
Even the stacked user interface for the iDrive infotainment is similar to other BMW cars, save for the different animation between menus. The instrumentation is a LCD display panel with two animated analog clocks taking up most of the real estate. While one is for the speedometer, the usual tachometer is replaced with a power meter that instantaneously displays how much of battery power is being used. There's a fuel and battery gauge too, and the latter essentially shows the remaining range for pure electric propulsion, which in BMW speak is called eDrive.
This Life Drive architecture that BMW keeps talking about is essentially this carbon fiber tub in which the passengers sit and an aluminum chassis that actually drives the car. At the back is a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine, essentially the same engine that BMW offers on the base Mini petrol in the global market, not available in India. The power output though, over 230 PS and 320 Newton meters from a 1.5 litre engine. Now that is a big number, and that's thanks to a lot of turbocharging. At the front you have electric motors which give you additional 130 PS of power and about 250 Newton meters extra. So the combined output is over 360 PS. What that translates into in BMW speak is a 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.4 seconds. The best I managed on these roads was about 5.3 seconds. Now, because there are two drivetrains in this car, one in the back and one at the front, there are two transmissions as well. The petrol engine gets a 6-speed automatic, the electric motors get a 2-stage automatic. Now, despite having a gearbox in this car, you don't get that feeling that there is actually a gearbox that is doing all the thinking and then transferring the power down to the road. Because even with the slightest dab of the throttle, the vehicle just wants to plunge forward. There's absolutely no delay. Dual clutch transmissions, I think even that sounds a little slow now with this car. And that's the beauty of these electric motors. Even a few degrees of throttle input and you have all the torque to play around with.
In e-drive, the i8 can achieve a top whack of 120 km an hour, and even at that speed, it uses only about 60% of the battery power. BMW claims that the car will do about 35 km in the e-drive mode, but the best we managed was 21 km before the batteries ran out.
Driving this car in the e-drive mode, the all-electric mode, makes this cabin very silent. There is hardly any road noise, there's hardly any wind noise. In fact, starting the car in the e-drive mode is like booting a gaming computer. You have a few beeps, everything lights up, and all you can hear are the cooling fans.
The batteries take about 4 hours to charge completely, and if there is sufficient juice in them on startup, the car chooses to boot in an all-electric mode by default. Else it is the petrol engine that wakes up with a hum. While the i8 is in motion, the petrol engine wakes up in 3 common scenarios: when the batteries are running out of juice, or when you exceed speeds of 120 km an hour, or when you push the shifter left to enter the sports mode. When the latter happens, the instrumentation transforms from blue to red and the power meter is replaced with a tachometer. The petrol motor revs quickly to its 6500 rpm red line. When you do indulge in spirited driving, which you will every now and then, the battery pack acts like a power booster in all scenarios where you need additional torque, like acceleration or cornering. And in most scenarios, most of the power is sent to the rear wheels, and that is what makes this car so much fun to drive. In hybrid mode, the i8 managed to run 19 km to a litre, which is phenomenal for a sports car. And even when the batteries drained out completely, the i8 managed 9 km to a litre. Like the M5, the i8 too fills up the cabin with a virtual sound, and the speaker is bolted between the so-called rear seats. It mimics the effect of a rear-engine sports car running on a flat-six powertrain, something like a Porsche 911. What is also impressive is the way the two drivetrains act like a torque-vectoring all-wheel drive system. It makes for an amazing grip when you push the i8 through corners. The linear power delivery of both the drivetrains adds more fun as you push the i8 harder. Again, something like a Porsche.
In typical BMW manner, this car has a 50-50 weight distribution. And because this is an electric hybrid, there are battery packs, and those battery packs sit below this passenger cell, below the carbon fiber tub. So what you get is a center of gravity that is really low. What that translates into is a car that remains almost flat when you're pushing around bends. And while you will love that handling, you may not necessarily like the steering feedback, especially if you're a BMW purist. It is precise, no doubt, but this new electric power steering system just lacks that feedback that you want from a typical BMW.
There are assistance systems too, like the pedestrian detection system and the lane keep assist, but they weren't very consistent. The ground clearance can become an issue in deep potholes or over tall speed breakers, but over the 3-day journey that we had, the underbelly never really touched anything. The suspension setup is typical BMW too, stiff through the corners and relatively comfortable over bumps. It isn't adjustable though.
In a lot of ways, the BMW i8 reminds me of the Porsches. It doesn't sound as nice, but it drives with a similar precision. And somewhere down the road, borrowing technology from the 918 Spider, even the 911s are going to turn into something like this. But this is where it starts. The i8 is the transition point. In my view, it joins the league of a lot of small yet significant things, like USB ports, the spray bidet in your toilet, e-books, touchscreen devices, Google Maps. They're small, but they've changed the way we live. I think the i8 will also change the way the sports cars of the future will dwell. Now, there are mild hybrid supercars like the LeFerrari, the P1, the 918, but they are in a different league altogether. Hybrid sports cars have largely been restricted to being concepts on show floors, And BMW has been bold enough to put one of them on the road and virtually unchanged. Now, this one also talks about going green and the sustainable mobility and even delivers on that promise. But at the same time, it manages to rate driving pleasure higher than anything else. And that is reassuring for you and me that the future of the automobile is not going to be boring as they made it sound.